Tonight, former Chief Minister Michael Gunner expected to announce his resignation from politics, triggering a by-election in Fanny Bay. Also tonight, a wild fight at a busy Darwin supermarket sends shoppers scampering for safety. Proof life is getting more expensive. Inflation jumps to its highest level in 21 years. And a ride to remember, quirky and colourful cars cruising across the NT for a good cause. Good evening, Amy Culpitt with ABC News. In a major shake-up of territory politics, former Northern Territory Chief Minister Michael Gunner is expected to announce his resignation from Parliament. Our reporter Mitchell Abram has been monitoring the situation. He joins us now from Parliament House. Mitch, do we know when Mr Gunner is expected to resign?
Well, Amy, as we understand it, Michael Gunner will deliver his resignation speech in Parliament tonight. We don't have a specific time, but we've been told it will happen sometime after 7 o'clock once the adjournment speeches begin. Now, this is the second resignation speech that Michael Gunner has given in as many months. He previously resigned as Chief Minister back in May in a shock announcement after delivering the 2022 budget, saying that the birth of his second child had made him consider his future and that his head and his heart were no longer in the job. Now, he was first elected as the member for Fanny Bay in 2008. And if he does, he was first elected as the member for Fanny Bay in 2008. And back when he was resigning as Chief Minister, he did say he would remain as the local member and go to the backbench. But obviously, if he does resign as expected, it will trigger a by-election for that electorate. Now, Fanny Bay has been held by Labor since 1995. Even if it does lose a by-election, it would leave Labor with 14 seats in Parliament, so not a dramatic shift in the balance of power in the Assembly. As I said, we are still waiting to see if Michael Gunner does make that resignation speech, but we'll keep you across that when we can. Amy?
Absolutely, Mitch. Thank you. We will have more on that shortly. Confronting footage has emerged of a violent brawl in one of Darwin's main supermarkets, allegedly involving at least 2 people armed with knives. Police say the violence is one of a handful of incidents in the CBD they're investigating over the past few weeks. Melissa McKay reports.
Chaos quickly turns to terror. At least 2 people brandishing knives. It's 4:30 on Tuesday afternoon when shoppers at the Darwin Woolies are forced to duck for cover. A nearby pharmacy shutting up shop as the violence continues.
There was customers from Woolworths like ducking in to make sure that they got into the pharmacy just to take safety.
Police say between 10 and 30 people were involved in this violent brawl, a fight between 2 groups of people. A 16-year-old boy has been arrested.
Possibly what group of people are in town, but again, we need to liaise with a whole heap of other non-government agencies to determine whether that information is correct or not.
Police believe it's unlikely there was a risk to passers-by and that no injuries have been reported, but say it's entirely unacceptable behaviour and terrifying for witnesses.
Very frightening. You know, I would not have liked to have been there if I had my family there.
Police say they're also looking into a handful of other incidents from in and around the Darwin CBD over the last few weeks, with some business owners saying they're reporting antisocial behaviour on a daily basis.
Yelling, screaming, fighting, abusive language, drinking in the park, yeah, you name it, we see it.
John Koenig says he's had to upgrade the lights around his ice cream shop and install fencing to deter bad behaviour after a knife was found in his garden bed.
How does a mum explain that? How do I explain that to the mum and the kids? Like, what is a machete doing in the hedge next to an ice cream shop?
Police say patrols around Darwin's CBD will be increased. Melissa McKay, ABC News.
The latest inflation data is out, and for the first time since 2001, it has hit 6.1%. The price of pretty much all goods, from food and drinks to furniture and fuel, has gone up again. But the rise in the past 3 months was slightly below the previous quarter, and economists think while more pain is in store for households, inflation may be nearing its peak. Here's business reporter Rhianna Whitson.
When people's fortunes are down,
4 and 9.49, all the 4s 44.
Business at this bingo hall goes up. The soaring cost of living means people here are struggling to make ends meet.
It's meat. The meat is very expensive, you know.
We've had to cut back on our food. We're feeding a family of 6. I'm living with my parents.
Consumer prices rose less than forecast, but are still up 1.8% in the quarter, taking annual inflation to 6.1%, the highest in 21 years since the GST was introduced. In just the last 3 months, the cost of building new homes went up by 5.6%. Fuel was 4.2% higher, despite the government's petrol excise cut still in place. And eating is getting much more expensive. Vegetables, fruit and meat are all costing a lot more at the checkout.
We're still seeing quite a lot of these global supply chain pressures. Food inflation is very strong, especially in the fresh food area because of the flooding in Queensland and northern New South Wales.
Annual core inflation, which strips out one-off price rises, is 4.9%, well above the Reserve Bank's 2 to 3% target range, and galloping along at twice the rate of wage growth.
Consumer prices are skyrocketing around the world, prompting the International Monetary Fund to downgrade its global economic growth forecast around 0.5% to 3.2%, while issuing a grim warning of uncertain times ahead as central banks react to inflation by aggressively hiking rates.
Next week's Reserve Bank's rate decision is already on the minds of shoppers and borrowers.
I have been forecasting some of the numbers like on my mortgage, and I think it's going to get painful. Obviously there's going to be knock-on effects in terms of real estate.
Economic trouble set to worsen. Rihanna Whitson, ABC News.
The Treasurer says today's inflation result is devastating news for Australians struggling to make ends meet. And there'll be more confronting forecasts tomorrow when Jim Chalmers delivers a much-anticipated economic update to Parliament. Here's political editor Andrew Probyn.
Everyone right to go?
A new government's agenda sideswiped by an economic contagion sweeping the world.
A lot of people living paycheck to paycheck for whom this inflation will be devastating.
Inflation at 6% is painful at any time, but when it's more than double wages growth, workers are going backwards.
The idea that we would be forecasting wages growth that keeps up with that, I think would not be credible in the near term.
You just said near term. Is that 12 months or 6 months?
I'll provide some more information tomorrow.
Which is when the Treasurer delivers an economic statement to Parliament. Inflation tipped to go even higher. Although Jim Chalmers did say there'd be real wage growth sometime in the next 3 years or...
this term of the Parliament.
Pain at the petrol pump set to get worse. Mr Chalmers confirming 22 cents a litre tax relief won't continue.
People should expect it to end in September.
There is no plan from Labor and Australians are paying the price.
The economic fight overshadowing Labor's parliamentary business.
Climate change bill.
Legislating a 43% emissions reduction target.
Time for action is now. We don't have a second to waste.
Order.
The ALP's election pledge to lower power prices under immediate attack from the former Energy Minister.
Will the Prime Minister guarantee to the House that Australian families will see that $275 cut?
I thank the member for Hume for his question and I congratulate him on his courage in asking it.
Order.
I was asked about power
Peter
prices.
Dutton using his first question time as opposition leader to target Anthony Albanese.
Has the Prime Minister met with any of the many union bosses from the CFMEU accused of criminal behaviour, including sexual assault, harassment and rape?
If the member opposite has an allegation or wants to know if someone I've met with, he should say it. What he's not entitled to do is to engage in that sort of smear tactic.
Judging by the first question time, there'll be nothing gentler about the new Parliament. Not that either side really expected otherwise. And the argument over the economy will only intensify when the Treasurer tomorrow reveals some sobering data on debt and interest rates, with the prospect of higher inflation and low wage growth for longer. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
The Northern Territory's newest federal representatives have given their first speeches in Parliament. CLP Senator Jacinta Price used her speech to name the victims of a double murder-suicide near Alice Springs earlier this month and called for more action to protect other children and women.
The families involved and our community are reeling from these not only deeply tragic, but I believe avoidable murders. From conversations with her family, I've been informed her alleged killer had a history of violence, mental illness, and was due to face court for perpetrating violence against the former partner.
Labor's member for Lingiari, Mariam Scrimgeour, criticised the NT Labor government in her speech for allowing intervention-era alcohol bans to expire. The NT government says the bans were racist, but Ms Scrimgeour says insufficient plans were in place to protect people from alcohol-related harm.
You can't just suddenly pull the pin on it without any protection, sanctuary or plan for the vulnerable women and children whom the original measure was supposed to protect. To do that is more negligent. At the level of impact on actual lives, it is tantamount to causing injury by omission.
The NT government is expected to soon meet with Federal Indigenous Australians Minister Linda Burney to discuss the lifting of the alcohol bans. A Katherine man in his 70s has become the 55th person to die with COVID in the Northern Territory. It comes as Royal Darwin Hospital reopens 2 dedicated COVID-19 wards to help deal with a surge in cases. Private clinics say their resources are also being stretched as patients rush to get their next booster shot.
In this top-end clinic, where a spike in patients and limited vaccine supplies are hitting hard, history feels like it's repeating itself.
It certainly feels like we're back at square one.
With the Northern Territory sitting at between 300 and 600 cases every day, dedicated COVID wards have been re-established at Royal Darwin Hospital as the BA4 and 5 Omicron subvariants surge.
Many of us are fatigued and we wish that COVID would go away, but we are in the midst of a BA5 wave here in the Northern Territory.
It's putting a huge amount of pressure on us. There's pressure because we're dealing with people who are unwell, we're dealing with people who are confused and scared about what's required.
Locals say while they're apprehensive about the new strains, the reality is COVID isn't going anywhere fast.
We're going to just have to live with it, just like the flu, I suppose.
I'm concerned, but I feel like that because we're learning to live with COVID, that, you know, we're just going to have to cope with the peaks and lows.
4th booster shots were made eligible to people over 30 years old about 2 weeks ago. And that's a decision staff here in Palmerston say have caught clinics on the hop and created a shortage in vaccine supplies.
We didn't think that the uptake would be so high, and so the challenge we've had is that supply has been short. But we're hearing that most places will have their restocks in by the end of this week.
The wait continues to see when this latest wave will finally break. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
The rapid spread of foot and mouth disease in Indonesia has led the nation to drastically cut its live cattle imports. Indonesia is Australia's most lucrative market for live cattle, and producers are feeling the pain of the outbreak. Indonesia correspondent Anne Barker reports.
Across the country, Indonesian farmers are racing to protect their herds. The highly contagious foot and mouth has infected 430,000 cattle.
The spread of foot and mouth disease has been incredibly fast, so we need to speed up vaccination.
I'm glad the vaccination was done today. I have healthy cows at the moment.
Australia supplies the bulk of Indonesia's cattle imports, but consumer demand for meat has sunk on fears of eating contaminated beef, though human cases are exceedingly rare.
People shouldn't worry about consuming meat products when they are prepared the right way.
Farmers are also fearful. Even one infected animal could force them to cull their entire herd, so imports of cattle are being drastically cut or suspended altogether.
Some have cancelled their import contracts. Some are no longer ordering cattle. In percentage terms, it's about 50% down.
In a good year, feedlots like this represent $500 million to Australia by importing around 300,000 head of cattle.
Indonesia is our most critical market because of its proximity,
it will always continue to be our most important market.
Indonesia has so far vaccinated about 700,000 cattle, but with a national herd around 18 million, there's a long way to go.
And it's smaller farms that have priority for vaccines because they're poorer and family-run, meaning business-owned feedlots have to buy their own vaccines or wait much longer, raising the risk of infection.
I think what is key here is that our assistance that Australia offers does get those vaccines on the ground.
Australian vaccines aren't due to arrive till next month. Livestock exporters say they're still confident the industry will recover.
You talk to exporters that have been around a while, this is part of the ebbs and flows.
But a recovery could be months away. Anne Barker, ABC News, Jakarta.
Still to come this hour, the stunning twist in a family's quest for justice.
We were trying to find a needle in a haystack and didn't know where the haystack was.
There really wasn't a proper police investigation into this matter.
Laura Tingle makes sense of today's confronting economic news. That's coming up.
Returning now to our top story, and in breaking news, former Chief Minister Michael Gunner has now formally announced his resignation in Parliament. Here's a little snippet of his speech a short time ago.
In May, I stepped down as Chief Minister. Tonight, I resign as the member for Fanny Bay. The reasons are the same. What is the best for the people I serve and what is best for my family. The months since my decision to step down as Chief Minister have allowed for further reflection about my work as member for Fanny Bay. This job, being a member, is one that is and should be all-consuming. I don't know any other way to do it. It is the only way to honour the faith people put in you. And the people of Fanny Bay, Parap, La Miller and the Gardens deserve someone who can give them everything.
That was Michael Gunner speaking in Parliament, where moments ago he announced his retirement from politics 2 months after he resigned as the Chief Minister. It's the 70-year-old cold case that's attracted attention across the world. Now, an Adelaide researcher claims to have made a major breakthrough, uncovering the identity of the infamous Somerton man found on a beach. Police have welcomed the development, but say it will be up to the coroner to make a final finding.
It's a case that's enthralled amateur sleuths for 3/4 of a century. The mystery man found dead on an Adelaide beach sparked wild theories. Persian poetry found in his pocket and intriguing codes found nearby prompted some to conclude he was a Russian spy. Now, a man who has dedicated his adult life investigating the case thinks DNA has provided the answer.
The best match we found to the Somerton man happened to be somebody in Victoria.
The development began more than a decade ago when researchers were given a piece of the Somerton man's hair. The DNA was then compared to records uploaded by the public to genealogy websites to build a big family tree.
You keep trying to find out how they related to each other, and you move them around like a Sudoku puzzle. And then finally you find the consistent way they all fit together, and the missing piece is the person you're trying to identify.
And that person is Carl Charles Webb, born in Melbourne in 1905. Just like Derek Abbott, he was an electrical engineer.
He's one of 6 siblings and he's the only one without the death records.
Other clues line up. The Somerton man had the name T. Keane printed on his tie.
It makes sense because Charles Webb had a sister, Frida, and the sister was married to Thomas Keane.
Police who exhumed the Somerton man's remains last year are cautiously optimistic the finding is, in fact, a breakthrough. It will be up to the coroner to confirm the finding once further DNA work is complete. We may now know who the Somerton man was, but we still don't know why or how he ended up here on this beach. Why did no one report him missing or recognise him? Why was his suitcase left at the train station? And what was the significance of the poetry and the codes? For now, the case is still far from closed.
It's not the end of the story by any means. Just finding his name is really just the beginning of the story.
There's now hopes the discovery could help crack even more unsolved mysteries. Ethan Ricks, ABC News, Adelaide.
After calling for it for more than 2 decades, a small town in the Northern Territory will finally open its first dedicated aged care facility later this year. The centre will be a game changer for the remote East Arnhem region and means ageing residents won't have to leave their families and can grow old on their home country.
The final pieces of a decades-long battle are coming together.
There are people that have been literally campaigning for 20-odd years to make this happen.
It's been a gruelling, at times heartbreaking wait to get the support and more than $30 million needed to open the first aged care facility in the Northern Territory town of Nhulunbuy. Brewa Munungur says for years he watched his Yolngu relatives forced to travel hundreds of kilometres from home, only to die in capital city hospitals far from family and traditional country.
Sometimes it can be so lonely in Darwin Hospital for those people. It's very lonely. And they want to, and that's what's in the mind of all of us.
The new centre, pegged to open in October, will mean ageing Yolngu and non-Indigenous or Balanda residents will finally be able to access proper aged care in their hometown.
The facility can accommodate 32 people. They're double rooms. We've also got a palliative care unit as well and 4 dialysis chairs that will be available down the track.
Its facilities, even its design, have been created by both Yolngu and Balanda hand in hand. Those involved say it's a triumph of Indigenous and non-Indigenous voices combining to create something special.
If it hadn't been for Yolngu, I don't think this one would have gone up. But we were talking to the right people that listened and listened good.
I feel as if the Yolngu spirit is here. I feel as if those people are part of it, whether they're not with us in body at the moment. I'm sure that those people are around and smiling down on this.
Walking, working and growing old together in one of the most timeless corners of the continent. Matt Garrick, ABC News, Nhulunbuy.
Now with more on the latest inflation figures, here's Daniel Ziffer with Finance.
Today's inflation figures aren't a shock to anyone that does the shopping with their eyes open. Overall, things are 6.1% more expensive than this time last year. But in the category called non-discretionary inflation, it's inching towards 8%. Discretionary goods are optional, like takeaway, holidays and alcohol. But people can't really consume less housing, food or fuel. So if you already didn't have income to spend on discretionary items, these are tight times. The US economy shrank in the first quarter of the year. Will it happen again? 2 negative quarters of growth is the definition of a recession. And even before the data is out, fears of one weighing down US indices, which might explain some of the flatness on the commodity markets. Part of a global economic outlook the optimists at the International Monetary Fund call gloomy and uncertain. The board is red, but your wallet isn't worth much less than yesterday. The value of the Aussie dollar slipping by tiny fractions of a percent against major currencies in trading today. Slightly up on our market. Looking ahead, it's worth remembering that mortgage payments aren't included in the basket of goods the Consumer Price Index measures to come up with the inflation figure. When the Reserve Bank meets next Tuesday, an expected 0.5 percentage point rise in interest rates will inflate the pressure. And that's finance.
Excitement is building ahead of the Commonwealth Games opening ceremony in Birmingham on Friday. The Australian athletes are tuning up for the Games, as are the people of the host city. National Sport reporter David Mark is in Birmingham.
Welcome to Birmingham. This city in the Midlands was once one of the powerhouses of the Industrial Revolution, but its reputation as a drab manufacturing hub belies its transformation.
Well, it's the second biggest city in the UK, so I think it's a chance that we could actually show what Birmingham is to all the people in the Commonwealth.
In a sign of support, large crowds turned out in Shirley Park in Birmingham's suburbs to see the Queen's Baton Relay pass by. And while expectations are rising in the city in anticipation, the same is true for the Australian athletes.
I already sense, though, that there's sort of just been a bit of a hype going on now that we're here.
The Australian women's cricket team play their first game on Friday against India in what is the first T20 cricket competition at the Commonwealth Games.
I think it's got a special place. You know, we play World Cups and Ashes and things like that, which are very important, but this is something a little bit different, and to be involved in the first one, I think it's got a lot of significance for us.
The Commonwealth Games may not have captured the world's attention just yet, but that's not the case in Birmingham. Already 1.2 million tickets have been sold, and here in town there's a palpable sense of excitement.
It's great. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Everybody's coming together for it. It's brilliant.
Yeah, we love anything for a knees up, anything for an excuse for a good knees up.
It's all, positive, sort of colourful things going on, and I think that's really amazing.
And it's not just the locals who are getting excited. People have come from around the country, including travelling in on the canals, which once made Birmingham the centre of trade in England.
It's one of these occasions which, if you can get there, you should make the effort to do that.
It's the Commonwealth, after all, as British as a nice cup of tea. David Mark, ABC News, Birmingham.
Colourful and quirky cars have descended on Darwin in preparation for a charity drive across the NT. The Variety Bash will start next month in Alice Springs before making its way to Darwin, raising funds along the way for children in need.
These rev heads are getting ready for a drive with some dressed up characters.
The craziest cars. They're all crazy and most of the people in them are crazy.
But it's not a race or a rally. They like to think of it as a trip with mates, all for a good cause.
At the end of the day, being able to fundraise money to kids in need is the reason we do it.
Nearly $250,000 have been raised in the NT so far this year. And next month, this group will travel from Alice Springs to Darwin, stopping at remote communities along the way, bringing joy to children in Daly River, Mataranka, Catherine and Howard Springs.
It's pretty popular with the kids. You know, they all love a crocodile. We've got lots of bells and whistles and flashing lights, and we've got giveaways for the kids, especially out back.
4 more cars have been registered so far this year, an improvement on last year's 24, and a whole lot better than the year before when there were no cars as the event was scrapped due to COVID. Organisers and participants are glad it's back in full swing for its 30th anniversary. Grateful for support at a time when lots of people are struggling with the rising cost of living.
Especially in the climate we're in at the moment, it's very, very hard to get money. People just don't have it. Businesses are struggling. You know, for the guys that have come on board and supported us and all the other cars, you know, can't thank them enough.
While it's serious business raising funds for children, the participants do it with a smile.
It's just like a big family. The atmosphere is like a big party.
This chariot is one of 28 cars to be registered so far this year. When the drive is done, all of these cars will come back here on Mindle Beach, hopefully after putting some smiles on faces. Nibir Khan, ABC News.
Now to the weather, and tonight's photo has been sent in by Joydip Roy. Sunny and cool right across the territory today with windy conditions throughout. A slight warmer night in Darwin. Temperatures dropped to 20 degrees. That was followed by a top of 32. 32 also the top today in Warramayunga and Bachelor. In Alice Springs, a freezing night and a cold day. 18 the top, Tennant Creek 23, Catherine, Borroloola and Maningrida all with tops of 31. Around the country today, Brisbane and Sydney both reached 20 degrees, Adelaide, Melbourne and Hobart all with tops of 15. Frontal cloud extends over southern West Australia and cloud has moved over Victoria and parts of New South Wales. A cold front and trough will move through the Bight and head towards Victoria and Tasmania. Interstate tomorrow, sunny days for Brisbane and Sydney, rain for Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne and Hobart. To our north, storms in Singapore 33, Denpasar and Dili both expecting tops of 29. Back home and around the territory, temperatures again dropping below freezing in Alice Springs, 21 the top in the daytime, Papunya and Yuendamu both 23. Further north, Nhulunbuy and Anuragu 28, Catherine 31, Galawinku 30 degrees. Dropping down to 18 degrees in Darwin tonight, 31 the top tomorrow, Bachelor and Wadeye both 32. There's a strong wind warning in place tonight for the Roper-Groot coast. Out on the harbour, seas less than a metre. The afternoon low will be at around 12:30. Sunrise tomorrow will be at 6 minutes past 7 and it'll set at 20 to 7. And looking ahead for Darwin, sunny and dry for a few more days before some moisture returns for the weekend. And in Alice Springs, sunny and cool with the chance of morning frost towards the weekend. And to stay up to date with the latest news from the Northern Territory, head to our website news.abc.net.au and select the Northern Territory from the drop-down menu. And stay with us now. Sarah Ferguson is up next with 7:30. Thanks for your company. Good night.
Welcome to the program. It's no